Hello, guys. Hello, I'm here. Today, the live webinar is going to be English. I'm going to introduce you to James and Betsy in a few seconds. So, I'm here with James and Betsy. I don't know what happened with the video. It was a little confusing. And I would like to welcome James and Betsy with this webinar with Crew Life.
Thank you.
I'm very excited about information that your office, Walker and O'Neill, can share with all crew members that follow us. And they ask questions every single day about how to handle, how to protect themselves, and what to do with if they have any issues. First, I would like to give the word to you and Betsy and tell us a little bit about your office, about your law firm.
Okay, Rafael, nice talking to you. Thank you very much for inviting us. I've been a lawyer for, let's see, a long time, 1983.
Oh,
Yeah, it's been a long time. And the practice of law, maritime law, has changed a lot during that period. I'll explain. I went to college, went to Duke University, and graduated in '83. The reason I go back to that far is that's when I met my partner, Lisa O'Neill. Lisa's not going to be here with us, but she's an integral part of our law firm. I started out as a defense attorney, so I was on the other side of the fence, so to speak. I defended cruise lines in claims brought by crew members against it. I went to law school at Tulane, graduated in 1983. I practiced in Tulane for 4 years. In 1987, I moved to Miami, the cruise ship capital of the world, of course, and I worked at a large law firm defending the cruise lines. Our law firm defended Carnival Cruise Lines, Royal Caribbean Cruises, and Norwegian Cruise Line. And then I went to another firm after a few years where I was the principal trial attorney for certain cruise lines, Dolphin Cruise Lines, Majesty Cruise Lines, and Ulysses Cruises. So I was the attorney responsible for trying the cases against the crew members who filed suit and also against passengers who were injured on the ship. And so I did that for many years. And then one morning, I had a conversation with my wife who said, you know, I met you when you were in college a long time ago, and you had dreams of helping people and fighting their oppressors and fighting against large corporations. Do you really want to be a defense attorney like this for the rest of your life? And this was shortly after I tried my last case for Dolphin Cruise Lines. And it was a case, I'll never forget this case. It was filed by a Filipino, a nice guy, hardworking. He was married. He had 4 kids, and he slipped and fell and had a back injury. And for various reasons, Dolphin Cruise Line, the director of claims of Dolphin Cruise Lines, was a former captain who then went in-house to work in risk management. And he wanted to make a point of defending this case. He was being filed by one of the leading maritime attorneys in Miami at the time, who he didn't like. The case became very, very personal. And we spent a lot of time, and the cruise line spent a lot of money defending the case. And we ended up trying the case at the Dade County Courthouse, and we got a defense verdict. So I won the case, and I felt like I was really doing the wrong thing at the time. This was not what I should have been doing. And this conversation with my wife really kind of cemented the fact that I needed to make a career change. So in 1996, I sent all my cases back to the cruise line and to their underwriters, and I started representing to the public that I was representing only crew members and passengers injured on cruise ships at that time. Of course, I didn't have a single client at that time, but that that was the beginning of where we are today. And so um, at the time, I advertised only on the internet. And so this was before Google was a search engine. So we had Alta Vista and various different
Out of,
kinds. If you remember that,
I remember. I remember.
yeah, and I created something called Cruise Law, and that has changed to my blog now that I write about uh, everything that happens on cruise ships, called Cruise Law News. But in 1996, I had no cases, no clients, no crew members, no passengers that I represented, and within about a year, we had about 150 cases. So there were not many lawyers advertising on the internet at all. Only one other lawyer had a website, and his website wasn't the best, and so we had a lot of cases. So there is something called a forum selection clause in a passenger ticket. So you go on a cruise ship. The cruise may have left from California, may have gone to the West Coast, down to Mexico, and back, and your injury could have occurred during that cruise. Yet you still have to file suit in Miami, Florida. So most cruise lines designate Miami as the place where the lawsuit has to be filed, and the courts have uniformly recognized the right of cruise lines to insert forum selection clauses in the passenger tickets. So you go on a cruise with your family, something bad happens to you, you become ill, you become sick, you become a victim of a crime, you have to find a lawyer in Miami. And people at that time were looking only on the internet to find lawyers. And I was one of the few attorneys advertising on the internet. So I very quickly had more cases than I could handle. So in 2001, September 10th, I believe, Betsy started working for me. And this was the best thing I could have ever done, except for marrying my wife, who then became my law partner.
Nice.
She has
We were
handled.
very young back
We
then,
were-
24 years ago.
We were young, and I had a full head of hair then. But we have worked together for almost 24 years now. And Betsy knows how to handle these cases. She's an integral part of our practice. So I have on the summary, Raphael, that I sent you, some of the areas that we'll discuss here today. And the first one is the rights of crew members.
Yes. I have a question about that. Can I start to ask you a question about the rights of crew members?
Sure, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. James, should I call James or Jim?
I prefer Jim, but
Jim.
my family calls me James. But either way is fine. Jim.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have some people over here in Instagram. If you would like to ask a question, please join us on YouTube. So the first question is, what are the most important legal rights every crew member should know before signing a contract?
The most important legal right is the right to receive medical treatment, curative medical treatment, for any injuries or illnesses which occur on the ship. That's the most important thing. A lot of times over the years, so to give you a perspective, we've handled probably 3,000 cases in the last many years, 24 years. So we've seen all types of situations. One situation we've seen quite often is when a crew member becomes ill, and it may not be a work-related accident. It may be some underlying medical condition, and the cruise line will terminate the crew member and abandon them, send them home to their home country, and provide no care at all. And one of the cases we're going to discuss in a little bit is the case of a Royal Caribbean crew member who began having back pain, and she went to the medical center. And Royal Caribbean at that time was sending their crew members who were injured throughout the Caribbean to the Dominican Republic. They'd send them to the DR, and they called these centers their centers of excellence. And at this medical center, they did a routine blood workup, and they found that this young woman had leukemia. And so a very, very deadly type of blood cancer, as you probably know. And she needed specialized chemotherapy and immunotherapy drugs, which were not available in the DR, of course. And they sent her home to Jamaica and basically abandoned her. So getting back to your question, the most important thing to realize is the cruise lines, it's one of the few legal rights that you have that is very important. They have the right to provide you curative medical treatment up to the point that you reach your medical maximum point of improvement. And so the cruise line didn't cause her to have leukemia. There's no way of proving that leukemia was caused by some condition on the cruise ship, but that doesn't really matter. They had the right, the crew members have the right to receive that medical treatment and to be timely informed of the nature of the treatment and to obtain options and to get back to the health that you enjoyed before becoming sick. So that's the most important right I can think of.
Is this crew member that got pregnant during her medical treatment?
Yes. So her story, very briefly, I'll get into. She not only had leukemia and was receiving, finally, we got her back to the United States. And one thing I have to tell you about our law firm is every medical case is closely monitored by my wife. And my wife is Lisa O'Neill of Walker and O'Neill, and she is the smart one in our law firm. She gets herself involved in these medical cases. One of the first things she does is she carefully reviews the shipboard medical records and the shoreside medical records, maps out the best plan for the crew members' recovery, and then gets local doctors here involved in the care and treatment of the crew members. So this crew member, this Jamaican young woman, who was 27 at the time, she came to the States. She saw doctors that my wife had arranged for her to see. We made sure that the cruise line was approving and paying for the medical treatment of the doctors that we selected, paying for her maintenance and cure. And that's also a very important legal right. So not only are you entitled to receive medical treatment when you become injured or ill on a cruise ship, but you also have to receive what's called maintenance and cure. Maintenance is the daily living expenses in a portion of your wages for a certain period of time. So they not only have to provide you free of cost, of course, with appropriate medical treatment, but also they have to pay you these financial benefits while you're recovering. And so while this woman was recovering, she was here at a hotel paid by the cruise line, and on her maintenance and cure, she became pregnant. And that developed all kinds of problems. She was receiving chemotherapy, and her unborn child, of course, needed specialized consideration during her pregnancy. So she had certain complications, and the cruise line initially struggled and complained, and they didn't want to cover her pregnancy, which she absolutely had a right to be paid for and under the medical treatment guaranteed by the cruise line that we were insisting they provided. And so she had to receive specialized care. But the good news is She's now, I think she is 15. Her daughter, her daughter is 15 years old now. I think she might be 16. So skip ahead. The crew member recovered from her leukemia, and it went into remission. She delivered a healthy baby, and her baby's thriving. It's doing well now.
Because
So
we not only fight to get the crew member the medical care that they need, but we make sure that they get the appropriate and adequate medical care. Sometimes they live in a third world country where the medical care is very below the level. So we fight hard to bring them here to the US, get them in a hotel and so forth, and make sure they have all the care that they need and the appropriate one. Aside from the fact that we get them also evaluated by an expert that we choose, so that we don't have to rely only on the doctor that is approved by the cruise line, but we get a doctor that we trust, and this doctor will evaluate also the case, the medical condition.
mhm. And Betsy and James, do you guys does the office represent all nationality, or does have to be certain nationality? I have a question over here from Vitor. He asked, I'm of another nationality. Does he work for all nationalities?
So in general, we represent all crew members of all nationalities. The exception is we no longer can represent Filipino crew members. And so this was one of the big changes in the law that I mentioned earlier. The cruise lines following in 2003, an NCL cruise ship, the SS Norway, big ocean liner, an old ocean liner, blew up at the port of Miami. And there were a dozen Filipinos who were killed and another 20 or so who were seriously injured. And there was always in Filipino crew member contracts, so their employment contracts always had a reference to the Philippine Overseas Employment Agreement, the POEA. And the POEA has very low limits for different types of injuries. For example, if you have an amputated hand, you get $12,500. You have an amputated shoulder, you get $25,000. Very low, insulting amounts of money.
Insulting, yes.
Very, very insulting. And so remember, I used to be a defense attorney. And so we always, when we were trying to settle a case, we would always bring out the fact, if it was a Filipino, that the general defense strategy was to say, if you don't take our settlement offer, we're going to enforce the POEA, the arbitration agreement of the Philippines, to try to get them to accept our offer. Sure enough, I never actually thought anyone would try to enforce the POEA arbitration agreement. But the cruise lines, following the NCL explosion of the Norway at the port where they had all these deaths, they began to try to enforce this Filipino arbitration agreement. And to the surprise of everyone, both defense attorneys and the plaintiff's attorneys for the crew members, the federal courts here in Miami actually enforced the arbitration agreements and sent all of the Filipinos from Miami, where they had filed suit, back to Manila. And they were subject to a limitation of liability of only $60,000 per death. And so we no longer can represent Filipinos because they're subject to the Philippine arbitration agreement.
Mm-hmm. And about this Jamaica woman that got pregnant during her medical treatment. Um, do you confirm that the office, the law firm, made the cruise line pay over $1 million in medical treatment for this crew member?
Yes, this woman,
Over a million.
it was over $1 million in medical treatment. So the chemotherapy and the immunotherapy and the hospitalizations and her hospitalization and the leukemia treatment, as well as the hospitalization of her child during the pregnancy, cost over $1 million. It might have been.
And that's the issue, that if you don't have an attorney, then the cruise line will just cut the crew member, their medical care, and then they end up without all the treatment that they need. And if they have an attorney working on their case representing them, then we make sure that they get all of the medical care, absolutely everything, with every specialist, as long as it needs to be, until they truly reach a point of maximum medical improvement. Because many times a cruise line will put pressure on their doctors to terminate their medical treatment. So we are on the lookout on all of that, and we will have them evaluated by other doctors, and we will fight that with them to make sure that they do get the medical treatment that's necessary.
And plus this 1 million, over 1 million in medical care, the office litigate the case and obtain more $500,000 for settlement,
Right.
or was included in the 1 million?
No. They paid $500,000 in a settlement because they mistreated this woman. They treated her very badly. They were trying to get away without not paying anything, and we kind of caught them red-handed, and we embarrassed them. And that particular case received a lot of attention. So one big part of my practice, of course, is I had mentioned that I have a law blog called Cruise Law News. And I don't typically write about cases that I'm handling. We would rather go to court and just, fight it out there. But in that particular case, I felt the need to talk about her case and to write about her case and bring attention to her case. And I know that the cruise lines, Royal Caribbean in particular, read my blog and understand that we're in for the long fight. And so that case got a lot of attention, and they wanted it to finally just go away. And so they ended up paying, in addition to the maintenance and cure and the medical treatment, also they paid her $500,000.
So I'm following you for several years, and in my opinion, why do you have more cases? Is that true that is Royal Caribbean and Carnival Cruises?
Well, we have probably at this point handled the majority of our cases have been Royal Caribbean Cruises cases against Royal Caribbean Cruises. And the reason for that, I believe, is that once you represent a crew member and you have their confidence and you do a good job for them and you get them the medical treatment and the compensation that they deserve, they're more likely to recommend you to other crew members. So we have represented probably several hundred Jamaican crew members. So they hear about certain woman's case or a certain man's case, and they call us, and we do the best we can to
by
represent
reference.
them.
Mostly it's by reference.
Mm-hmm. Word of mouth. Mm-hmm.
Word of mouth. Yeah, we also have traveled to Jamaica quite a bit. We go down to Montego Bay and Ocho Rios, and we make the effort of of appearing before them. We've done this kind of format in a hotel there, where we go down and meet the crew members who need help and explain to them their rights, and that seems to have been a good thing to do. Now, Betsy hasn't gone down there yet.
I haven't been there to Jamaica.
Oh, which city have you been there? Ocho Rios, Montego Bay.
Falmouth, Montego Bay, Ocho Rios. We fly into Montego Bay. Jamaica's a wonderful country.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And we have many friends down there now, and they drive us around, and it's just idyllic.
And Jim and Betsy, can you share with me your thoughts about the most safe cruise line based on reputation and good practices?
I would say in general that Disney Cruise Lines, we have found, and these are my personal beliefs. So I think that Royal Caribbean and Celebrity, Carnival Cruise Lines, and Norwegian Cruise Lines sometimes treat their crew members fairly, but many times they don't. And Carnival, I would say, is the worst. You didn't ask me for the worst, you asked me for the best. I would say Carnival Cruise Lines treats their crew members the worst. They treat their environment the worst. They're the worst polluters. Don't get me started, but Disney Cruise Line, as a general proposition, treat their crew members, I think, the best. They pay them more. They don't work them as hard. They treat them with a far greater degree of respect and compassion than other crew members. What do you think, Betsy?
Yeah, definitely. It must be Disney for sure.
And last year, I went to Carnival ship and I went to Disney ship to visit for a day. The difference is huge. Even treatment on the terminal and everything was different. And I have worked also in Norwegian Cruise Line. For me, I think I don't remember if I had the treatment, but it was okay, in my opinion, working in the region. In Royal Caribbean, I had some physical issues, but it was like a long time ago, 2008, I think. And when I went, I did 3 contracts on Disney. They treat you very well, for sure. Yes, I do agree with you. We talk with a lot of crew members. Is the dream company to go for almost like 90% of the crew member that I talk about it, to go work in a cruise line. And a lot of people start in Costa, MSC, Carnival, but the dream to go is Disney. A lot of people say that to me. And let me ask you one question. If a crew member injured on board, what steps should a crew member follow to protect their legal rights?
Well, the first thing that a crew member must do when he or she is injured, and again, it's not only when they're injured, it's when they become ill. So a lot of crew members think if they become ill and it's not the fault of the company, then they won't make a big deal about it. But if you're injured or ill, you have to go to the ship doctor. He or she may not solve the problem, but without that documentation, it's very difficult later to make a claim. And so I think the first and foremost thing is you have to go down to the ship doctor. You have to complain. You have to see the doctor if possible. You don't just see the nurse. So make a complaint so there's documentation of that will later become important for your attorney or if you're handling your case yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating proof that you had an injury or a condition, so it's important to have that documentation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then keep the documentation for if anything happened, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we've had many, Royal Caribbean used to have a certain record keeping they don't do this any longer, but they used to have, they keep forms in triplicate. So they have the original, they'd send a copy of the form back to Shoreside in Miami, and then they give a crew member a copy. So we've had many situations. So the first thing Betsy does when a crew member calls our office, she gets the medical records that crew member may have. Then she'll notify the cruise lines in a letter asking for all documentation and for all medical records. Many times, the medical records that we eventually get from the cruise lines are missing records.
Incomplete.
They're incomplete. So she has to patch it all together. So that's an important thing, is to keep the documentation.
Okay, guys, if you got ill on board, injury, keep the documentation, okay? And again, if you'd like to ask a question to Betsy and Jim, please write down over here in the chat, and I may ask them a question. I have another over here. How long does a crew member have to file a claim after getting injured?
So there's a 3-year limitation period, 3 years. It's very important not to sit on your rights, of course. And so we see a lot of situations where, take for example, a waiter. A waiter will begin experiencing pain, shoulder pain, low back pain, maybe his wrist pain, and he will endure that situation, not trying to make a problem, hardworking, and then eventually he'll realize that he needs medical treatment. So he may go to the ship doctor once in a while, get some ibuprofen, have momentary relief of pain, but eventually his case becomes more serious. His or her case becomes more serious. You only have 3 years. So all the time is ticking away. And so many times a crew member will come to us and we'll ask them, the first question Betsy will ask is, when did you first have this problem? So a lot of times there's not a big accident that happens that everyone remembers a certain date. They'll say, well, I had pain and the pain has been going on for maybe 2 or 3 years or 3 or 4 years. Well, that's a very big difference. So you have to file a claim. You have to contact an attorney and file a claim. And so now, as I mentioned, arbitration, you have to file an arbitration claim. You can no longer file a lawsuit. So our courts in Miami are literally closed to crew members. So you can't file a lawsuit any longer. You know, when I started suing cruise lines, Betsy and I were talking about this. We used to file suit down at the Dade County Courthouse, which used to be right across the street from where I practice. So you would go right, file the lawsuit, and sometimes it would take maybe a year or two to get a trial date, but you could actually try a case right there with the jury of your peers, with the Dade County jury. So Dade County used to be about the best place you could file a lawsuit representing a foreign, non-U.S. crew members, because the jury was all non-American, the very diverse jury pool here. So it was a good place to file suit. So now you have to file an arbitration claim with an arbitration panel, and there are no jury trials, there are no judge trials. You're before a single arbitrator. But whether it's, put that aside, you have to file that claim within 3 years. It's very important. You have to keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, the crew members need to, as soon as they have an injury or a condition, they should definitely contact the lawyer, because the lawyer will monitor everything, will make sure they get the proper care, will get the proper experts to prove their case. And otherwise, time is ticking. And also, most times, the cruise line will not rehire them. So they're wasting their time. They're getting mediocre medical care. And then when they finish treatment or sometimes they're terminated before they finish treatment, the cruise line will not rehire them. So regardless, I mean, it's better to have an attorney so that the attorney can get them the care that they need, will make a claim for them, get them money, and then maybe after that they can go to some other cruise line if that's what the type of work that they want to do. But regardless, many times they can't do the same type of work they were doing because that's what caused the problem in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And what happens if the crew member reports the injury after 3 years? Do they lose their rights?
If they report the injury
after 3 years,
if they report the injury too late, there's no basis to file a claim to hold the cruise line accountable.
Oh, okay.
So who knows what will happen at that point? I mean, it's always better to report it sooner than later. But, you know, I have to also explain that if you are injured on a cruise ship and the company provides you with medical treatment, the statute of limitation can shift into the future. So it's 3 years from the date of the last medical treatment. So if you're injured and you continue to receive medical treatment and the medical treatment lasts 3 or 4 years, once it's turned off, once it's stopped, there's always an issue is should it have stopped at that point? So typically when a crew member comes to our office, we'll send them to another doctor, and that doctor will be asked is the crew member at his point of maximum medical improvement, MMI date. And if he's not, the cruise line still has to provide the maintenance and cure that I mentioned earlier. So there's always a basis to file suit for the failure to provide the ongoing medical treatment and the maintenance and cure.
Yeah, thank you. This is very important information, Jim. Very important. And can a crew member sue the cruise line while still under contract, or have you done that before?
Oh, sure. Most of the cases we handle is the crew member is injured during the course of his contract. He's not been fired, and the cruise line will do something wrong at that point. They'll either not provide the care at all, or they'll provide the wrong type of care, or they'll provide care but terminate the care too soon, but the crew member is still technically under contract. So that happens more often than not.
Oh, yes, most cases. They're still under contract. Yeah.
And how to, when this happened, they are under contract. Is there any protection against retaliation if a crew member speak up or files a complaint?
So this is an important issue. Cruise lines, in most scenarios, can terminate a crew member, can fire a crew member for any reason. And so one of the first things I learned when I studied maritime law is it's called employment at will. It's at the will of the employer, meaning that if a crew member feels that he's being mistreated or he's being discriminated against, whatever the story is, the cruise line has the right to fire the crew member. So you can fire a crew member for good cause, bad cause, or no cause at all. The only exception to that general rule of at-will employment is when you have been fired because you have hired a lawyer. So the irony is if you hire a lawyer, they cannot fire you, because if they fire you, there'll be an argument that they fired you in retaliation to hiring a lawyer. And so there's a case called Batten versus Carnival Cruise Line, where a crew member was terminated because he hired a lawyer. and threatened to file a claim. And Carnival just said, goodbye and sent you back home. And in that situation, it was the only exception I've ever seen when a cruise line was held liable for wrongful termination. So the most common complaint that we receive in our office is a crew member who's been terminated by a cruise line, hasn't hired a lawyer, may have been injured. But if a crew member is injured and doesn't hire a lawyer, but is fired by the cruise line, he has no right to sue for wrongful termination. It's kind of a confusing situation.
And just to be more clear to our audience, even for me, what's the real difference between filing a case in arbitration versus going to court?
So the difference is going to court is a phrase we used to use, right?
Mhm.
I'll see you in court. Now we can't see anyone in court any longer. The only people we can sue in court is when you're representing a passenger. So passengers still have the right to file suit against cruise lines. They now require the lawsuit to be filed in federal court. We no longer can file any claims in state court. But as far as crew members go, their only option at this point is hiring a lawyer and filing an arbitration claim. So it's not technically in court because there are no more courts open to the crew members. But you can go down to a meeting room and eventually have an arbitration hearing in front of the arbitrator, typically one arbitrator, and that's how the legal cases are now handled.
It used to be that we filed everything in court, but now since they changed their contracts so that if they have a condition or an injury, then we have to file an arbitration claim. That's pursuant to their contracts.
Okay. And if somebody happens with a crew member, can a family member also file a claim if a crew member dies during the negligence, due to negligence on board?
A family member can file a claim following the death of a crew member only as a personal representative of that crew member's estate. So if the crew member dies, God forbid, then there's certain legal claims that have to be asserted in arbitration. And assuming that the family member is designated and appointed as a personal representative of the decedent crew member's estate, that's the only situation where a family member can file suit.
Mm-hmm. Jim and Betsy, can you share what types of cases does not your firm do? Like, what kind of cases do you normally reject?
Well, I mentioned a couple of them. One type is when a crew member has been fired. So I probably receive several a week. So a crew member will contact me and say, I was treated unfairly. I've worked hard. I think my supervisor favors some woman and he's giving the woman the best seats and the best arrangement. And there's all kinds of funny business going in. And I'm not going to stand for it. I want to assert my rights. I want to file suit. There's no way on earth we can help them in that situation. So crew members can be fired freely for good reason, bad reason, or no reason. Other situations we can't help crew members are situations where they call us and complain that they've been treated unfairly. They may well have been treated unfairly, but they're not being treated unlawfully. So there are very, very few situations absent a physical injury.
Or another employee is picking on them or is bullying them or things like that, we can't really, there's no basis for a claim, a legal claim.
Right.
Okay. Mhm. And can we step on like pregnancy on board? Can we step on this matter?
Pregnancy?
Yes. What's the woman's right about being pregnant on board? Is that anything that the cruise line should do to support them or no?
Um, Typically, most cruise lines have policies where they no longer, at a certain month of pregnancy, they no longer will recognize the right of women to work. So you typically don't have situations ever where a crew member is at 6 months or 7 months or 8 months or 9 months. There's never typically a scenario where that arises. So when a crew member becomes ill, and again, we talked about the Jamaican lady who,
Mhm.
if you have a injury or an illness, the cruise lines begin to provide treatment or provide you benefits. The cruise line at that point is then automatically obligated to provide all necessary medical treatment of whatever nature. So in her scenario, she became pregnant, and they had to provide her the medical treatment because they were already providing, at our demand, a treatment for her leukemia. So if you have a healthy woman who becomes pregnant, typically she's no longer permitted to work after a certain number of months. And so I can't remember exactly the cutoff. Certain cruise lines have certain different dates, but there's no right to have your pregnancy paid for by the cruise lines.
Mhm. Okay. And what evidence is like most valuable in a crew injury case?
Um, the only evidence that you'll ever get from the cruise line, of course, is you're never going to get the cruise line to voluntarily turn over the accident report. The accident report is considered to be a legally privileged document done in anticipation of defending a lawsuit. So that's called the work product privilege. So as far as American arbitration claims or American lawsuits, how we used to file them, we would, of course, always request the accident report. And with the accident report becomes certain other information, such as photographs of the accident scene, things of that sort, observations about the conditions of the deck, if it's a slip and fall accident, if it's an explosion case, all that very detailed information is part of the accident report. Typically, we never ever are able to find that information because the courts consider that to be uniformly privileged documentation done in anticipation of filing a lawsuit. But the most important information that we do obtain is the medical information, of course,
The ship infirmary records.
ship infirmary records.
Mhm. And how much does cost for a crew member to start a case?
So all lawyers in Florida, in the United States as a general proposition, who work on a contingency are not permitted to charge the crew member anything whatsoever. So there are no costs, and the crew member is finally obligated to pay only if the lawyer is successful and receives a settlement or a verdict at the arbitration hearing.
And it's a standard fee agreement, the amount, the percentage that is allowed in the state of Florida for us to charge.
Right. So the standard contingency fee agreement is 1/3 of the gross recovery.
Mhm. Nice. A lot of people. I'm asking questions that some people are also asking over here in the chat. And are injuries due to poor ergonomics, like repetitive motion, harder to win in a court? Harder to win a court or arbitration?
Some people could say they're harder to prove. We've handled probably half of our injury cases are repetitive injury cases. So we've handled many, literally hundreds of cases involving waiters. So now the cruise lines have changed their ergonomics of lifting heavy trade. Now they're letting crew members use carts in some cruise lines in some situations. It used to be you'd have to lift a heavy tray and you have to get it up and lift it up. And the tray could be as heavy as 50 pounds. And of course, you do that morning, lunch, dinner, perhaps at times a midnight buffet. You're lifting a heavy tray literally 100 times a day. You develop all types of repetitive injury cases due to poor ergonomics. So
even young crew members, very young in their 20s, we've seen terrible back injuries because of that.
Right. So it's important, of course. One of the things that we do, of course, is we track the type of cases that we have seen because we have so many. So the cruise lines, of course, will claim, what are you talking about? We've never had a back injury case of a waiter, things like that. And if you have, of course, you've represented prior crew members who have had the same type of injury, it's very easy to disprove that and to set the record straight.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me, Jim and Betsy, what's the most powerful case your firm has ever won?
The biggest recovery that we've handled involves
Kenneth Good.
Mr. Good's case.
Kenneth Good.
Yeah, it was a crew member who worked on a celebrity ship, and the celebrity ships had changed the sets, had changed, fundamentally changed
The theater.
the theater,
Mm-hmm.
and they hired an outside company to come in and to go have to work up at the rafters, probably 30 or 40 feet above the stage. And they were doing all types of shortcuts, and the cruise line had pretty much turned the job over to this independent contractor who came on, didn't supervise them, didn't enforce any safety regulations at all, and they cut a hole in the overhead grid. And so there were no safety cones in place, there were no barricades in place, and our client was stepping backwards and stepped through a hole and fell 40 feet down to the stage floor and had very, very serious injuries. I think that was the biggest monetary settlement that we handled. He received several million dollars. We have also represented probably 100 crew members who have been sexually assaulted. So I'm not talking about sexual harassment. I'm talking about a sexual crime. And those cases involve forensic evidence and are very tragic cases. Those cases have settled for many millions of dollars. We've handled many cases like that.
James and Betsy, you told me you represent passengers, right?
Right.
And I saw and I heard a lot of passengers, they are looking for something to file a claim, to do a lawsuit, to gain money, right? We have people that, okay, something happened and they file a lawsuit. But a lot of people we saw, they try to get some millions, to get some money from the cruise lines. But to do that, they do something bad with the crew member. They put something, some people uh, change some perspective, and how a crew member can protect themselves from the people that go inside the ship and try to do like a lawsuit, uh, sexual harassment, or any kind of suit that they can, tell, oh, this crew member did that to me, or blah, blah, any. Because I talk about a lot about with this with the crew members to protect themselves.
Right, right.
And
So
but do you have any advice for them?
my suggestion, of course, is you have to keep your distance. And so the remarkable thing about the cruise industry, I believe, is how hardworking the cabin attendants are, and how they're servicing every need. They're always coming by. They're making sure they have extra towels. They're making sure the rooms are spotless. But they have to be careful. You can't let your guard down with a smiling face who lets you into the cabin. You can't ever be, if you're a male crew member, you can never ever go into a cabin alone with a guest, because you're just inviting trouble. So that would be my one suggestion. Um, we have, I don't think we have ever seen a guest make a false claim. I mean,
Yeah.
by the time,
We're not many claims against crew members either.
no, I don't think we ever have. But the important thing, of course, is when a client comes to us, we've never met the client before, whether it's a crew member or a guest, and we have to prepare them for what's coming. We have to interview them. We have to go through a mock deposition, a mock trial. We have to see if they can stand up to basic questions. And very quickly, we'll come to the understanding of whether this is a legitimate case or not.
Exactly.
We spend a lot of time with that, because the last
We
thing,
analyze the case like if we were the cruise line
yeah,
against them.
we have to do that. The last thing we ever want to do. And so I've written about claims of certain passengers. There was one claim against Holland American Line of a guest who was going through an electronic automatic door that should open up when you get through and close when you made it on the other side. And in fact, the door slammed shut. It didn't hit the passenger hard, but hit him on the side of the head. And he filed a claim and convinced a jury to award him over $20 million. And the cruise line appealed that and found out that he was totally faking his injuries. And they had testimony of his secretary, who testified against the passenger, that he was faking it. And so, you have to be careful if you're a crew member, never to find yourself alone in a situation where it's her word or his word against you.
I saw this video of the door. I saw it.
Yeah, I think it was Holland American Line.
And for example, I'm gonna give you a real example. If a room service person comes to the room and somebody inside the room tries to touch and take the crew member clothes, what do you think this crew member should do?
You're saying a passenger tries to take a crew member's clothes?
Yes.
You're talking about undress a crew member, or just
Yes.
he
Try.
should he should immediately, one, he shouldn't find him in a situation where that's even possible.
Mhm.
He should stay outside the cabin. And if he makes a mistake of going into the cabin and this occurs, he immediately has to report that to his supervisor. He needs to find himself as quickly as possible. I mean, typically, I don't believe that most passenger cabins have CCTV cameras. He has to find his way as quickly as they can to a part of the ship that has a camera, and then report the injury to his supervisor. Not the injury, report the situation to his supervisor.
Mhm. This case happened with me in my first contract. I ran away to the security office and I did a lot of statements. It was the guy. I'm a 6'2". The guy was like 6'7". Was like massive. I was really afraid. But some, since I left the room, I was like, "Phew," it went. And what message do you have for the crew members who are watching this live and are afraid to speak up if something happened?
Well, what I would say is this: is that in speaking up, I mean, the reality is, of course, you know, one of our titles was the right of crew members. So, other than me talking about the right to receive medical treatment and to receive maintenance and cure, there aren't many rights that crew members have. I would like to say you have the right to this and right to that, but I would just be saying false things. It's important, of course, given the reality of cruise ship life, that you have to maintain a good working relationship. You have to stay positive. There's no question that crew members are hardworking. You can't complain, of course, except when your own physical health is at issue. And so you have to draw a line between taking a certain amount of abuse, a certain amount of hardship, a certain amount of disrespect, getting the job done. But when it comes to your personal health, if you're feeling pain, if you're suffering on your job, you have to speak up. And once you hire a lawyer, once you have a lawyer on your side, that's the only situation where the cruise lines cannot fire you. They can fire you, as I said many times, for good cause, for no cause, or bad cause, but you can't be fired when you contact a lawyer. So hiring a lawyer is never going to cause you to be fired. Never going to be. If they fire you, that's when you definitely have a case for being fired from your job. So my suggestion is, of course, you have to play the game. You have to maintain a positive attitude, but you have to fight for your own rights when you're injured for a minimum.
And whenever they have any question about anything or they have a certain situation, they could feel free to call us. We'll talk to them, give them our best advice.
Hmm. Can you share your website and your phone number? I can type over here in the chat and people can contact you.
Sure. Let me give you my cell number because it's my WhatsApp number. It's area code 305
305. Oh,
305 297 0578. And
They can also reach us by email, by Zoom. They can send me an email and we can set up a Zoom conference with them, or we can call them. We'll try to find whichever way is best.
okay. Okay. Now we reach an hour, and I know we set a time for like an hour live webinar because now it's 5 o'clock and it's time to go home. And but I do need to say thank you very much. Like, it was very nice to draw some lines. A lot of people ask about like something that like for humiliating managers or picking or bully colleague, and they ask us every day about it, but they don't know about this health conditions, this this right. They normally in Brazil, Peru, Argentina, they don't know too much about it. It's nice now people that are listening to it, that are watching us, know they have rights if they don't, if they get ill or injured.
They can easily contact us at jim@cruiselaw.com or betsy@cruiselaw.com, and we will answer their questions.
Okay, thank you. It was a pleasure, James and Betsy. Send my regards to Lisa.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you, Raphael, very much.
Thank
Take
you. Bye
care.
bye.
Thank you. All
See
right.
you
Bye-bye.
soon.
I can terminate the live. My my computer is like it's giving me tilt. I don't know how I'm going to do, but I'm gonna say bye. I'm gonna take it off me and you from the live webinar.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Raphael.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Raphael.
Bye
All right.
bye.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.